Question 1. Implementation of a robust expert selection process for a complex liability claim requires careful consideration of several factors. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the ethical and regulatory framework governing claims management? Option A. Selecting an expert based on their extensive experience in the specific field relevant to the claim, their objective analysis of the facts, and a thorough review for any potential conflicts of interest. Option B. Hiring an expert recommended by the insured's legal counsel without independent verification of their qualifications or potential biases. Option C. Prioritizing an expert who is readily available and has the lowest fee, regardless of their specific expertise or the thoroughness of their independent assessment. Option D. Engaging an expert who has a strong track record of providing opinions favorable to the insured, even if their methodology is less conventional. The correct answer is D. Engaging an expert who has a strong track record of providing opinions favorable to the insured, even if their methodology is less conventional. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because selecting an expert witness requires a delicate balance between advocating for the insured's position and adhering to ethical and regulatory obligations. The claims manager must ensure the expert's opinion is both credible and unbiased, avoiding any appearance of impropriety or undue influence. The AICM exam emphasizes the importance of maintaining professional integrity and compliance with relevant regulations, which dictate the standards for expert selection and testimony. The correct approach involves a thorough vetting process that prioritizes the expert's qualifications, experience, and independence. This includes reviewing their credentials, past testimony, and any potential conflicts of interest. The goal is to secure an expert whose opinion is based on sound scientific or professional principles and who can present their findings objectively, thereby upholding the integrity of the claims process and complying with regulatory expectations for fair and accurate claims handling. An incorrect approach would be to select an expert solely based on their willingness to provide a favorable opinion, regardless of the scientific or professional merit of their conclusions. This could lead to an expert whose testimony is easily challenged on grounds of bias or lack of objective analysis, potentially violating regulatory requirements for evidence and expert testimony. Another incorrect approach is to overlook potential conflicts of interest, such as a pre-existing business relationship with the insured or their legal counsel, which can undermine the expert's credibility and create an ethical breach. Furthermore, failing to adequately assess the expert's communication skills and their ability to explain complex matters clearly and concisely to a jury or arbitrator can render their valuable expertise ineffective, leading to a suboptimal outcome for the claim. Professionals should approach expert selection by first clearly defining the specific expertise required for the claim. This should be followed by a comprehensive search for potential candidates, focusing on objective criteria such as academic background, professional experience, publications, and prior testimony. A critical step is conducting due diligence to identify and mitigate any potential conflicts of interest. Finally, the selection should be documented, outlining the rationale for choosing a particular expert and how they meet the claim's needs and regulatory standards. Question 2. Which approach would be most consistent with ethical claims handling principles and regulatory requirements when a claimant, who has recently experienced a significant personal loss, submits a claim that appears to have some minor inconsistencies in the supporting documentation? Option A. Focus solely on identifying reasons to deny the claim based on the minor documentation issues, without a comprehensive assessment of the overall loss. Option B. Immediately offer a reduced settlement based on the perceived inconsistencies, assuming the claimant may be less able to challenge the offer due to their personal circumstances. Option C. Delay the claim processing indefinitely until all possible documentation, even that which is not strictly necessary for claim validation, is obtained, citing the need for absolute certainty. Option D. Proceed with a thorough and objective investigation, seeking clarification on the minor inconsistencies from the claimant in a sensitive and empathetic manner, while adhering to policy terms and regulatory guidelines for promptness. The correct answer is B. Immediately offer a reduced settlement based on the perceived inconsistencies, assuming the claimant may be less able to challenge the offer due to their personal circumstances. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical challenge in claims handling, balancing the insurer's financial interests with the claimant's right to fair and timely compensation. Professional challenge lies in navigating potential conflicts of interest and ensuring that decisions are made impartially, without undue influence or bias. The claimant's vulnerability and the potential for financial hardship if the claim is mishandled add a layer of ethical responsibility. Careful judgment is required to uphold professional integrity and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective investigation of the claim, gathering all relevant evidence, and applying policy terms and conditions fairly. This approach prioritizes transparency, good faith, and promptness in claims resolution, aligning with the core principles of ethical claims management and regulatory expectations for fair dealing. Specifically, it adheres to the duty of utmost good faith, which requires insurers to act honestly and fairly towards policyholders and claimants. It also reflects the regulatory requirement to handle claims efficiently and without undue delay, ensuring that legitimate claims are paid promptly. An incorrect approach that involves delaying the investigation to gather more information without a clear, justifiable reason would fail to meet the regulatory standard for prompt claims handling. This delay could be construed as acting in bad faith, potentially causing financial prejudice to the claimant. Another incorrect approach, such as offering a settlement significantly below the estimated value of the claim based on an assumption of the claimant's desperation, would violate the principle of fair dealing and could be seen as exploiting a vulnerable party. This directly contravenes the ethical obligation to treat all parties with respect and to offer settlements that are reasonable and proportionate to the loss. A third incorrect approach, which involves prioritizing the insurer's cost-saving measures over a comprehensive and objective assessment of the claim's merits, would also be ethically and regulatorily unsound. This demonstrates a failure to act in good faith and could lead to an unfair outcome for the claimant, potentially resulting in regulatory sanctions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the policy terms and applicable regulations. This framework involves objectively assessing all available evidence, considering the claimant's perspective, and making decisions based on fairness, good faith, and promptness. When faced with complex situations, seeking guidance from supervisors or legal counsel is a crucial step to ensure ethical and compliant handling. Question 3. The analysis reveals that a commercial property insurance policy contains an endorsement that modifies the definition of flood to exclude damage caused by surface water runoff from heavy rainfall, even if the runoff is a direct result of a storm. The insured has submitted a claim for water damage to their inventory, which they attribute to an unprecedented downpour causing significant surface water accumulation and subsequent ingress into their building. The insured believes this is a covered peril under the general water damage provision of their base policy. What is the most appropriate course of action for the claims professional to take regarding this claim? Option A. Forward the claim to the underwriting department for a decision on whether to waive the endorsement exclusion based on the severity of the storm. Option B. Investigate the claim by reviewing the specific language of the endorsement and its interplay with the base policy's water damage provisions to determine if the loss falls within the exclusion. Option C. Advise the insured that the claim is covered under the general water damage provision, as the endorsement is likely intended for more specific flood events and not general storm-related runoff. Option D. Deny the claim immediately based on the insured's description, assuming the endorsement clearly excludes all forms of water damage related to heavy rainfall. Correct answer is B. Investigate the claim by reviewing the specific language of the endorsement and its interplay with the base policy's water damage provisions to determine if the loss falls within the exclusion. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the claims professional to balance the insured's expectation of coverage with the precise wording of an endorsement that significantly alters the original policy terms. The insured may genuinely believe their loss is covered based on their understanding of the base policy, while the endorsement, if not properly understood or communicated, could exclude it. This creates a potential conflict between customer satisfaction and adherence to contractual obligations and regulatory requirements. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the specific endorsement language and its interaction with the policy's declarations and insuring agreements. This approach is right because it upholds the principle of utmost good faith and ensures that coverage decisions are based on the legally binding terms of the insurance contract. Specifically, in the context of U.S. insurance regulations, The insurer has a duty to interpret policy language in a manner that is not ambiguous, and where ambiguity exists, to construe it in favor of the insured. Furthermore, regulatory guidelines often mandate clear and conspicuous disclosure of policy limitations and exclusions, especially those introduced by endorsements. Failing to acknowledge the impact of a clearly worded endorsement would be a breach of contract and potentially a violation of unfair claims settlement practices if it leads to an improper denial of a valid claim. An incorrect approach would be to disregard the endorsement and proceed as if the base policy terms solely applied. This is ethically and regulatorily unsound because it ignores a legally binding amendment to the insurance contract. It violates the principle that all parts of the policy, including endorsements, form the complete agreement. Such an action could lead to a wrongful denial of a claim, exposing the insurer to regulatory penalties for unfair claims practices, such as failing to effectuate a prompt, fair, and equitable settlement of claims. Another incorrect approach would be to assume the endorsement is invalid or unenforceable without proper investigation. While endorsements can sometimes be challenged on grounds of improper execution or lack of notice, claims professional cannot unilaterally decide an endorsement is invalid. This requires a legal determination. Proceeding without this would be a failure to adhere to the contractual terms as presented. A third incorrect approach would be to grant coverage solely to maintain customer goodwill, despite the clear exclusion in the endorsement. While customer service is important, it cannot supersede the contractual obligations and regulatory requirements governing insurance. This approach risks setting a precedent for future claims and could be viewed by regulators as a failure to apply policy terms consistently and fairly, potentially leading to accusations of discriminatory claims handling or a lack of adherence to underwriting guidelines. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of all policy documents, including endorsements. If the language of an endorsement is unclear or its impact on the claim is significant, the claims professional should consult with underwriting and legal counsel to ensure accurate interpretation and application of the policy terms. The decision must be documented thoroughly, explaining the rationale based on the policy language and applicable regulations. Question 4. The risk matrix shows a moderate probability of significant liability exposure in a complex commercial property damage claim. The insured is a long-standing client with a strong business reputation. The initial assessment suggests potential negligence on the part of a third-party contractor, but the extent of the insured's own contributory negligence is unclear and could impact the total payout. The claims manager is considering several approaches to manage this claim, which approach best balances regulatory compliance, ethical obligations, and client relationship management. Option A. Initiate a comprehensive investigation involving independent adjusters and legal counsel to thoroughly assess all aspects of liability and damages, while maintaining open communication with the insured regarding the process and potential outcomes. Option B. Immediately offer a settlement based on the lower end of the estimated damage range to contain costs, assuming the insured will accept to avoid further dispute. Option C. Defer any significant decision or offer until all potential avenues for subrogation against the third-party contractor are exhausted, regardless of the impact on the insured's immediate needs. Option D. Rely solely on the insured's initial report and internal adjuster's preliminary assessment to determine the settlement amount, avoiding external expert opinions to expedite the process. Correct answer is B. Immediately offer a settlement based on the lower end of the estimated damage range to contain costs, assuming the insured will accept to avoid further dispute. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a claims manager to balance the immediate need to manage costs with the long-term implications of their decisions on the insured's business operations and the insurer's reputation. The insurer's duty of good faith and fair dealing, a cornerstone of insurance regulation in the U.S., mandates that claims be handled promptly and equitably. Furthermore, specific state insurance regulations often dictate timelines for investigation, communication, and settlement, and failure to adhere to these can result in regulatory penalties and reputational damage. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation to accurately assess liability and damages, followed by prompt and transparent communication with the insured and claimant. This aligns with regulatory requirements for fair claims handling practices, which emphasize promptness, thoroughness, and good faith. By engaging in a comprehensive review and seeking expert advice where necessary, the claims manager demonstrates due diligence and upholds the insurer's obligations. This proactive and thorough method minimizes the risk of litigation, regulatory scrutiny, and dissatisfaction from all parties involved. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on minimizing immediate payout, without a full understanding of liability risks, regulatory, and ethical failures. This could lead to underpayment of valid claims, violating the duty of good faith and fair dealing. Such an approach may also breach specific state statutes governing claims handling, such as those requiring prompt investigation and settlement of covered losses. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying the investigation to gather more information without a clear justification or communication to the parties, can be construed as a failure to act with reasonable promptness, a common regulatory violation. This can also erode trust and lead to accusations of bad faith. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a thorough understanding of the facts and applicable law, followed by a balanced assessment of risks and potential outcomes. This involves adhering to regulatory mandates, ethical principles of fairness and good faith, and internal company guidelines. When faced with complex liability scenarios, seeking expert opinions and maintaining clear, documented communication with all stakeholders are crucial steps in ensuring a fair and compliant resolution. Question 5. Operational review demonstrates that a claims adjuster is processing a property damage claim under a policy that specifies replacement cost value RCV coverage. The damaged item is a roof that was installed 15 years ago. The adjuster is considering 3 potential methods for determining the RCV settlement. 1. Calculating the cost to replace the roof with identical materials at current market prices, without applying any depreciation. 2. Calculating the cost to replace the roof with identical materials at current market prices, but applying a depreciation factor based on the age of the original roof. Or 3. Estimating the RCV based on the original purchase price of the roof, plus a nominal increase for inflation. Which approach best aligns with the principles of RCV coverage and regulatory compliance for property claims? Option A. Calculating the RCV based on the cost of a functionally equivalent but less expensive material. Option B. Calculating the cost to replace the roof with identical materials at current market prices, without applying any depreciation. Option C. Calculating the cost to replace the roof with identical materials at current market prices, but applying a depreciation factor based on the age of the original roof. Option D. Estimating the RCV based on the original purchase price of the roof plus a nominal increase for inflation. Correct answer is B. Calculating the cost to replace the roof with identical materials at current market prices, without applying any depreciation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the claims adjuster to balance the insurer's financial interests with the policyholder's contractual rights, specifically concerning the application of replacement cost value, RCV. The core challenge lies in accurately determining RCV in a manner that is both compliant with the policy and regulatory requirements, and fair to the insured. Misinterpreting or misapplying RCV can lead to underpayment, disputes, and regulatory scrutiny. The correct approach involves accurately calculating the cost to replace the damaged property with materials of like kind and quality at current market prices, as stipulated by the policy and relevant regulations. This requires thorough investigation, obtaining current quotes, and applying depreciation only when the policy contractually permits it for actual cash value (AC) settlements, not for RCV settlements until the replacement is actually made. This approach aligns with the principle of indemnity, ensuring the insured is made whole without profit, and adheres to regulatory mandates that define RCV and prohibit unfair claims settlement practices. An incorrect approach of applying depreciation to the RCV settlement upfront, before replacement occurs, is a failure to adhere to the policy's RCV provision and likely violates regulations prohibiting misrepresentation of policy benefits and unfair claims settlement. This misrepresents the policy's promise of full replacement cost. Another incorrect approach of using outdated cost data or estimates that do not reflect current market prices for materials and labor also fails to meet the RCV standard and can be considered an unfair claims practice, as it does not provide the insured with the full cost of replacement. Finally, an approach that arbitrarily limits the RCV based on the original purchase price of the damaged item, rather than its current replacement cost, fundamentally misunderstands and misapplies the RCV principle, leading to an inadequate settlement and potential regulatory violations. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the policy language regarding RCV and ACV. They must then conduct a diligent investigation to gather accurate, current cost data for replacement. This data should be transparently communicated to the policyholder, and the settlement offer should clearly reflect the RCV as defined by the policy and applicable regulations. If the policy allows for ACV settlement, initially with the option for RCV upon replacement, this process must be clearly explained and executed according to the policy terms and regulatory guidelines. Question 6. System analysis indicates that a claims handler is processing a property damage claim arising from a storm. The claimant resides in State A, but the insurance policy was issued by a company headquartered in State B, and the damage occurred while the claimant was temporarily residing in State C for work. The claims handler is unsure which state's laws apply to the investigation and settlement of this claim. Which of the following approaches best ensures legal compliance for this claim? Option A. Apply the laws of State A, where the claimant permanently resides, as this is the claimant's domicile and the policy was likely intended to cover risks associated with their primary residence. Option B. Apply the laws of State C, where the damage occurred, as this is the location of the insured event. Option C. Conduct a conflict of laws analysis to determine the most appropriate jurisdiction's laws to apply, considering the claimant's domicile, the location of the insured event, and the insurer's principal place of business. Option D. Apply the laws of State B, where the insurance company is headquartered, as this is the company's primary operational jurisdiction. The correct answer is D. Apply the laws of State B, where the insurance company is headquartered, as this is the company's primary operational jurisdiction. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in claims management, balancing the need for efficient claims resolution with the absolute requirement of adhering to legal and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying and applying the correct legal framework when faced with potentially conflicting information or interpretations. A claims handler must possess a deep understanding of the governing regulations to ensure that all actions taken are legally sound and ethically defensible, thereby protecting both the claimant and the insurer from legal repercussions. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the claimant's policy, the applicable state statutes governing insurance claims, and any relevant case law that might interpret these statutes. This systematic process ensures that all decisions are grounded in established legal principles and are consistent with the insurer's contractual obligations and regulatory duties. Specifically, the claims handler must identify the governing jurisdiction for the policy and claim, then meticulously apply the laws of that jurisdiction to the facts of the case. This includes understanding notice requirements, investigation timelines, and payment obligations as defined by statute and case law. Adherence to these legal mandates is not merely a procedural step, but a fundamental ethical and legal obligation, preventing bad faith claims and ensuring fair treatment of the insured. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on internal company procedures or past practices without verifying their alignment with current statutory requirements. This failure to consult and apply the governing law can lead to violations of consumer protection statutes, breach of contract claims, and allegations of bad faith. Another incorrect approach is to make a decision based on an incomplete understanding of the claimant's policy or the relevant statutes, potentially leading to an improper denial of benefits or an inadequate settlement. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal framework that underpins claims handling. Furthermore, ignoring or misinterpreting specific statutory provisions, such as those related to timely investigation or communication, exposes the insurer to regulatory penalties and legal action. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal and regulatory compliance at every stage of the claims process. This involves 1. Identifying the governing jurisdiction and relevant laws. 2. Thoroughly investigating the facts of the claim. 3. Applying the law to the facts to determine coverage and obligations. 4. Documenting all decisions and the legal basis for them. 5. Seeking legal counsel when complex legal issues arise. This structured approach ensures that claims are handled fairly, efficiently, and most importantly, in full compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. Question 7. The control framework reveals that a claims handler is interviewing a witness to a motor vehicle accident. The witness is providing their account of the incident. The claims handler, wanting to expedite the process and ensure the statement aligns with the insurer's preliminary assessment, asks a series of leading questions designed to elicit specific details that support a particular sequence of events. The handler then summarizes the witness's responses, incorporating their own interpretations and phrasing, before asking the witness to sign the statement. Which approach to obtaining the witness statement is most consistent with regulatory requirements and professional ethical standards for claims management? Option A. Pressuring the witness to sign the statement quickly to avoid delays, without allowing for thorough review or amendments. Option B. Omitting any details from the witness's statement that do not directly support the insurer's desired outcome, even if the witness mentioned them. Option C. Asking leading questions to confirm specific details that fit the insurer's initial assessment, and then summarizing the witness's responses using the handler's own phrasing. Option D. Allowing the witness to provide their account freely, with the claims handler accurately recording their words, and allowing for review and correction before signing. The correct answer is D. Allowing the witness to provide their account freely, with the claims handler accurately recording their words, and allowing for review and correction before signing. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a claims handler to balance the need for thorough investigation with the ethical and regulatory obligations regarding witness statements. The core difficulty lies in ensuring the integrity and admissibility of evidence while respecting the rights and privacy of individuals involved. A claims handler must navigate potential biases, ensure statements are obtained fairly, and maintain accurate records, all within the bounds of applicable regulations. The correct approach involves obtaining a witness statement that is a true and accurate reflection of the witness's account, free from undue influence or suggestion. This means allowing the witness to provide their narrative in their own words, with the claims handler acting as a facilitator and recorder, not a director of the testimony. This aligns with the principles of natural justice and evidential rules that prioritize reliable and untainted evidence. Specifically, in the context of the Associating Claims Management (AIC) exam, which is understood to operate within a framework that emphasizes fairness and accuracy in claims handling. This approach ensures that the statement can be relied upon in subsequent claim assessments and potential legal proceedings. It upholds the duty to investigate claims diligently and impartially. An incorrect approach would be to subtly guide the witness towards a particular version of events. This could involve leading questions that suggest specific details or outcomes, or paraphrasing the witness's statements in a way that alters their original meaning or emphasis. Such actions compromise the objectivity of the statement, potentially rendering it inadmissible as evidence or leading to an inaccurate assessment of the claim. This violates the ethical obligation to obtain evidence fairly and the regulatory requirement for claims handlers to act with integrity and competence. Another incorrect approach is to omit details from the witness's statement that, while not directly contradicting the witness, might be inconvenient or unfavorable to the insurer's position. This constitutes a misrepresentation of the witness's account and undermines the principle of full disclosure. It can lead to a flawed claim decision and expose the claims handler and insurer to regulatory sanctions for failing to conduct a thorough and honest investigation. A third incorrect approach is to pressure the witness to sign the statement without allowing them sufficient time to review it or make corrections. This disregards the witness's right to ensure the accuracy of their own words and can lead to statements being signed under duress or without full comprehension. This failure to respect the witness's autonomy and ensure the accuracy of the recorded statement is a significant ethical and regulatory breach. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to obtaining factual information through fair and transparent means. Claims handlers should be trained to conduct interviews in a manner that encourages open and honest disclosure, to document statements accurately and comprehensively, and to be aware of their ethical and regulatory obligations at every stage of the claims investigation. When in doubt, seeking guidance from supervisors or legal counsel is a crucial step in ensuring compliance and maintaining professional integrity. Question 8. Consider a scenario where a claimant, who has recently experienced a significant property loss, contacts their insurer expressing extreme financial distress and requesting an immediate advance payment on their claim, citing urgent repair needs. The claims manager has received the initial claim notification, but is still awaiting some supporting documentation from the claimant and has not yet completed a full assessment of the loss. The claims manager is aware of the insurer's internal guidelines regarding advance payments, which require a preliminary assessment of coverage and a reasonable estimate of the loss. What is the most appropriate course of action for the claims manager in this situation? Strictly adhering to regulatory compliance and ethical claims handling principles. Option A. Process a partial payment based solely on the claimant's verbal assurance of the loss amount and their urgent need, without waiting for any supporting documentation or internal assessment. Option B. Advise the claimant that an advance payment can be considered once all required documentation is submitted and a preliminary assessment of coverage and loss has been completed, while also offering guidance on potential interim financial assistance options if available and permissible under policy terms and regulations. Option C. Inform the claimant that no payment can be made until the entire claim investigation is finalized and all documentation is received, regardless of their financial hardship. Option D. Immediately issue an advance payment to the claimant to alleviate their financial distress, as the claimant's situation appears dire and the insurer should demonstrate empathy. The correct answer is B. Advise the claimant that an advance payment can be considered once all required documentation is submitted and a preliminary assessment of coverage and loss has been completed, while also offering guidance on potential interim financial assistance options if available and permissible under policy terms and regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a claimant's immediate need for funds and the insurer's obligation to adhere to regulatory requirements for claim processing. The claims manager must balance empathy and efficiency with the imperative of legal compliance, ensuring that all necessary documentation and verification steps are completed before disbursing funds. This requires a nuanced understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, which dictates the permissible timelines and procedures for claim settlements. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the policy terms and conditions, verification of all submitted documentation against policy requirements, and adherence to the statutory or regulatory timelines for claim investigation and payment. This ensures that the insurer acts in good faith, fulfills its contractual obligations, and avoids potential penalties for noncompliance. Specifically, claims manager must ensure that the claimant has provided all necessary information and that the claim itself is valid under the policy. Any payment made prior to this verification could be considered an improper disbursement, potentially leading to financial loss for the insurer and regulatory scrutiny. An incorrect approach would be to expedite the payment solely based on the claimant's emotional appeal or perceived urgency, without completing the required verification steps. This bypasses essential due diligence and regulatory mandates, exposing the insurer to risks of fraudulent claims, overpayments, and violations of claims handling regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the payment indefinitely without proper communication or justification, which could be construed as bad faith claims handling, leading to regulatory sanctions and reputational damage. Furthermore, making assumptions about the claim's validity without independent verification, even if the claimant is a long-standing customer, is a failure to follow established procedures and regulatory guidelines. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and good faith claims handling. This involves 1. Understanding the specific policy and applicable regulations. 2. Gathering all necessary information and documentation from the claimant. 3. Verifying the claim's validity and the extent of coverage. 4. Communicating clearly and promptly with the claimant regarding the process and any required information. 5. Adhering to established timelines for investigation and payment, while also considering any provisions for interim payments where permitted and appropriate. Question 9. Stakeholder feedback indicates a desire to significantly reduce the average claims handling time for workers' compensation cases within the state. Which of the following approaches best optimizes the claims process while ensuring strict adherence to state workers' compensation laws? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of current claims handling procedures, cross-referencing each step with the specific statutory requirements and timelines mandated by the state's workers' compensation laws, and then implement process changes that align with these legal obligations. Option B. Focus on streamlining communication between adjusters and medical providers to expedite information gathering, without a formal review of all statutory compliance points. Option C. Implement a new claims management software system that promises faster processing times, assuming it can be adapted to accommodate state-specific requirements later. Option D. Prioritize reducing the number of claims requiring external legal review, even if it means slightly bending interpretation of certain statutory deadlines. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of current claims handling procedures, cross-referencing each step with the specific statutory requirements and timelines mandated by the state's workers' compensation laws, and then implement process changes that align with these legal obligations. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient claims processing with the absolute legal mandate to adhere to state workers' compensation laws. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and implementing process improvements that do not inadvertently create noncompliance with statutory requirements, which can lead to significant penalties, legal disputes, and damage to the organization's reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any optimization efforts are grounded in a thorough understanding of the specific state's workers' compensation statutes and administrative rules. The correct approach involves a systematic review of current claims handling procedures against the specific requirements of the applicable state workers' compensation laws. This includes verifying that all statutory timelines for reporting, investigation, benefit payments, and dispute resolution are met. Furthermore, it necessitates ensuring that claims adjusters are adequately trained on these legal obligations and that internal controls are in place to monitor compliance. This approach is correct because it prioritizes legal compliance as the foundational element of any process optimization, ensuring that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of statutory obligations. Adherence to state workers' compensation laws is not optional. It is a fundamental legal requirement that protects injured workers and dictates the operational framework for claims management. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the average claims handling time without a corresponding review of statutory compliance is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the legal framework, potentially leading to missed statutory deadlines for benefit payments or claim investigations, which can result in penalties, interest, and adverse legal judgments. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing new software or technology without first ensuring it can be configured to meet all state-specific reporting and payment requirements is also flawed. This overlooks the critical need for technology to support, not dictate, legal compliance. Such an approach risks creating a system that is efficient but non-compliant, leading to the same negative consequences as the first incorrect approach. A third incorrect approach that relies on general best practices for claims management without specific reference to the governing state's workers' compensation statutes is also problematic. While general best practices can be valuable, they must be tailored to and validated against the specific legal mandates of the jurisdiction. Failure to do so means that best practices might not actually be legally compliant in the given state. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a comprehensive understanding of the relevant state workers' compensation statutes and regulations. This understanding should then inform the evaluation of existing processes and the development of any proposed improvements. A risk-based assessment should be conducted to identify potential areas of noncompliance. Any proposed process changes should be vetted against these legal requirements, and training should be provided to ensure staff understand and can execute the compliant processes. Continuous monitoring and auditing are essential to maintain compliance and identify any emerging issues. Question 10. Process analysis reveals that a policyholder has submitted a claim for damage to their property. The policyholder asserts that the damage is covered under a specific endorsement, interpreting the endorsement's language to include their situation. The insurer's initial review, based on a preliminary understanding of the endorsement, suggests the claim may not be covered. The claims professional must now determine the correct course of action for evaluating this claim. Option A. Rely solely on the insurer's internal claims handling manual and past claim files to determine coverage, as these represent the company's established procedures. Option B. Immediately deny the claim based on the insurer's initial assessment, as the policyholder's interpretation differs from the insurer's preliminary understanding. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the policy language, including the endorsement, applying established principles of insurance contract interpretation to determine the intent of the parties and the plain meaning of the terms. Option D. Accept the policyholder's interpretation without further scrutiny, as their understanding of the endorsement appears reasonable to them, to ensure customer satisfaction. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the policy language, including the endorsement, applying established principles of insurance contract interpretation to determine the intent of the parties and the plain meaning of the terms. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the claims professional to navigate the inherent ambiguity that can arise when interpreting policy language, particularly when the insured's interpretation appears reasonable, but conflicts with the insurer's initial assessment. The AICM exam emphasizes the importance of adhering to established principles of insurance, contract interpretation, and regulatory guidelines to ensure fair and consistent claims handling. Careful judgment is required to balance the insurer's contractual obligations with the insured's reasonable expectations, all within the bounds of applicable law and policy terms. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective analysis of the policy language, considering established canons of construction, and applying them to the specific facts of the claim. This approach prioritizes understanding the intent of the parties at the time the policy was issued, giving plain meaning to unambiguous terms, and construing ambiguous terms against the insurer. This aligns with regulatory expectations for fair claims practices, which often mandate that policy provisions be interpreted in a manner that does not mislead or deceive the policyholder. Ethical considerations also dictate that claims professionals act in good faith, which includes a diligent effort to understand and apply policy terms fairly. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the insured's interpretation solely because it differs from the insurer's initial stance, without a comprehensive review of the policy wording and relevant interpretive rules. This could lead to a denial of a valid claim, potentially violating regulatory provisions that prohibit unfair claims settlement practices. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on internal claims handling manuals or past practices as definitive interpretations, rather than the actual policy language and governing legal principles. This fails to acknowledge that policy language is the ultimate source of coverage and that internal guidelines must be consistent with that language and applicable law. A further incorrect approach would be to adopt the insured's interpretation without critically examining its alignment with the policy's plain meaning, even if it seems favorable. This could result in an overpayment of a claim or coverage for a risk not contemplated by the policy, potentially leading to financial impropriety and undermining the principle of contractual intent. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying the specific policy provisions at issue. They should then research and apply the relevant canons of insurance contract interpretation, such as the plain meaning rule, the contra pro frontum rule, construing ambiguities against the insurer, and the doctrine of reasonable expectations. This analytical process should be documented thoroughly, demonstrating the rationale for the coverage decision. If ambiguity persists after applying these principles, seeking clarification from legal counsel or underwriting may be necessary. The ultimate decision must be grounded in a good faith interpretation of the policy contract, consistent with regulatory requirements and ethical obligations. Question 11. Risk assessment procedures indicate a claimant who has suffered a significant injury is considering a structured settlement. The claimant appears eager to receive a lump sum payment to address immediate financial pressures, but has expressed limited understanding of the long-term implications of a structured settlement versus a lump sum cash payout. The claims manager must ensure the process adheres strictly to the regulatory framework governing structured settlements in the relevant jurisdiction. Which of the following actions best upholds regulatory compliance and ethical obligations in this scenario? Option A. Facilitate the structured settlement by ensuring the claimant receives a clear, comprehensive explanation of all terms, including tax implications, the financial security and licensing of the annuity provider, and strongly recommend they seek independent legal and financial advice before finalizing the agreement. Option B. Advise the claimant that a structured settlement is generally tax-advantaged and proceed with the agreement, without detailing the specific tax implications or the security of the annuity provider. Option C. Proceed with finalizing the structured settlement agreement after obtaining the claimant's signature, assuming their desire for immediate funds overrides the need for extensive explanation of long-term benefits and risks. Option D. Recommend the claimant accept a lump sum cash payout instead of a structured settlement, as this avoids the complexities of explaining structured settlement terms and potential future risks. Correct answer is C. Proceed with finalizing the structured settlement agreement after obtaining the claimant's signature, assuming their desire for immediate funds overrides the need for extensive explanation of long-term benefits and risks. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a claims manager to navigate the complex regulatory landscape surrounding structured settlements, ensuring compliance with specific legal frameworks while acting in the best interest of the claimant. The core challenge lies in understanding and applying the nuances of the governing regulations to a situation where a claimant might be susceptible to undue influence or lack full comprehension of long-term financial implications. Careful judgment is required to balance the claimant's immediate desires with their future financial security, all within the bounds of legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, which mandates specific disclosures and protections for claimants entering into structured settlement agreements. This approach prioritizes the claimant's informed consent and long-term well-being by ensuring they receive comprehensive information about the settlement's terms, the security of the annuity provider, and their rights. Regulatory justification stems from laws designed to prevent financial exploitation and ensure that such agreements are truly in the claimant's best interest, often requiring independent legal counsel or financial advice for the claimant. An incorrect approach that fails to adequately explain the tax implications of a structured settlement to the claimant would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This omission violates the principle of informed consent, as the claimant cannot make a fully informed decision without understanding the tax treatment of their future payments. Another incorrect approach, such as failing to verify the financial stability and licensing of the annuity provider, exposes the claimant to undue risk and violates regulatory requirements designed to protect claimants from insolvency of the payment source. Furthermore, pressuring a claimant to accept a structured settlement without allowing sufficient time for review and consultation with advisors would constitute a violation of ethical duties and potentially regulatory mandates regarding fair dealing and avoiding undue influence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive review of the applicable regulations governing structured settlements. This includes understanding disclosure requirements, claimant protections, and any mandated waiting periods or consultation requirements. The next step is to assess the claimant's understanding and capacity to make such a significant decision, offering resources for independent advice. The claims manager must then ensure all necessary disclosures are made clearly and comprehensively, addressing all aspects of the settlement, including tax implications and the security of the annuity. Finally, the process should be documented meticulously to demonstrate adherence to all regulatory and ethical standards. Question 12. Benchmark analysis indicates that a claims professional is handling a complex property damage claim. During an initial phone call, the insured provides a detailed account of how the damage occurred. The claims professional takes notes during the call, but does not have any independent verification of the insured's statements at this point. The claims professional needs to document this interaction in the claims file. Which of the following approaches best reflects the required documentation standards for evidence? Option A. Omit the conversation from the claims file, as it is only the insured's unverified statement. Option B. Document the insured's account as a verified fact, as the insured is the primary source of information for their claim. Option C. Document the conversation with the insured, clearly noting it as the insured's account of events, and record the date and time of the call. Option D. Summarize the insured's account as factual findings in the claims file, without mentioning the source of the information. The correct answer is C. Document the conversation with the insured, clearly noting it as the insured's account of events, and record the date and time of the call. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the claims professional to balance the need for thorough documentation with the ethical obligation to maintain client confidentiality and avoid misrepresentation. The core of the dilemma lies in how to accurately and ethically record information that may be incomplete or potentially misleading if presented without context. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all documentation is truthful, accurate, and supports the claims process without violating professional standards or legal requirements. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting all gathered evidence, including its source and any limitations or uncertainties. This means recording the conversation with the insured, noting the date and time, and clearly stating that the information provided is the insured's account. It also requires documenting any subsequent steps taken to verify or corroborate this information, such as requesting further documentation or speaking with other parties. This approach upholds the principle of accuracy and completeness in record keeping, which is fundamental to claims management. It also respects the insured's right to provide their account, while ensuring that the insurer has a clear and unbiased record of the information received and the steps taken to process the claim. This aligns with the ethical duty to act with integrity and diligence, ensuring that decisions are based on a complete and accurate understanding of the facts. An incorrect approach would be to omit the conversation with the insured from the file, or to summarize it in a way that omits the fact that it was solely the insured's statement. This failure to document a significant interaction with the claimant is a breach of professional duty to maintain a complete and accurate claims file. It could lead to misinterpretations of the claim's history and potentially result in an unfair outcome for the insured or the insurer. Another incorrect approach would be to document the insured's statement as verified fact without any attempt to corroborate it. This misrepresents the evidence and violates the duty of truthfulness and accuracy in documentation. It could lead to decisions based on unverified information, potentially causing financial harm or leading to disputes. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to transparency and accuracy. When faced with potentially incomplete or unverified information, the claims professional should always document what they know, what they don't know, and what steps they are taking to bridge the knowledge gap. This involves clearly distinguishing between statements of fact, opinions, and unverified accounts. Ethical guidelines and regulatory frameworks emphasize the importance of maintaining a clear, concise, and truthful record of all claim-related activities. Question 13. The audit findings indicate that a significant number of claims handled by a particular adjuster have been settled without a thorough assessment of the claimant's potential contribution to the incident, leading to potential overpayments. The adjuster's rationale, as documented, suggests a belief that it is always more efficient to assume minimal claimant fault to expedite settlement. This approach is being reviewed against the regulatory framework governing claims handling in the relevant jurisdiction, which has adopted a modified comparative negligence standard, where a claimant's recovery is barred if their fault exceeds 50%. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and professional claims management standards in this scenario? Option A. Immediately apply a contributory negligence bar to any claim where there is any indication of claimant fault, regardless of the jurisdiction's specific negligence laws, to prevent any possibility of overpayment. Option B. Continue to expedite settlements by assuming minimal claimant fault, as the audit findings primarily concern potential overpayments, which are generally less problematic than underpayments. Option C. Settle all claims at full value to avoid any disputes regarding fault, as the primary objective is customer satisfaction and efficient claim closure. Option D. Conduct a detailed review of all evidence to determine the percentage of fault attributable to the claimant and adjust the settlement offer accordingly, ensuring the claimant's recovery does not exceed 50% of their total damages if their fault is found to be 50% or less. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed review of all evidence to determine the percentage of fault attributable to the claimant and adjust the settlement offer accordingly, ensuring the claimant's recovery does not exceed 50% of their total damages if their fault is found to be 50% or less. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the claims adjuster to navigate the complexities of comparative and contributory negligence laws, which vary significantly by jurisdiction and can have a profound impact on claim settlements. The adjuster must accurately assess fault and apply the correct legal standard to ensure a fair and legally compliant outcome, avoiding both underpayment and overpayment of claims. The pressure to settle claims efficiently can sometimes lead to overlooking these critical legal nuances. The correct approach involves meticulously analyzing the evidence to determine the degree of fault attributable to each party involved in the incident. This requires a thorough understanding of the specific jurisdiction's negligence laws, If the jurisdiction follows a pure comparative negligence standard, the claimant can recover damages even if they are primarily at fault, with their recovery reduced by their percentage of fault. If it's modified comparative negligence, the claimant's recovery is barred if their fault exceeds a certain threshold, e.g., 50% or 51%. If the jurisdiction follows contributory negligence, any fault on the part of the claimant, however slight, completely bars recovery. The adjuster must then apply the determined percentages of fault to the claimant's damages according to the applicable legal standard. This approach is ethically and regulatorily sound, as it upholds the principles of fairness and adherence to the law, ensuring that settlements are based on established legal doctrines and accurately reflect the parties' responsibilities. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the claimant's potential fault and proceed with a full settlement, as if the claimant were entirely blameless. This fails to comply with the jurisdiction's negligence laws, which mandate consideration of the claimant's contribution to the incident. Such an approach could lead to an overpayment of the claim and potential regulatory sanctions for failing to apply the law correctly. Another incorrect approach would be to automatically apply a contributory negligence bar to any claim where the claimant bears even a minor degree of fault, without first confirming that the jurisdiction in question actually follows a contributory negligence rule. Many jurisdictions have moved to comparative negligence systems. Applying a contributory negligence bar in a comparative negligence jurisdiction would unjustly deny a claimant compensation they are legally entitled to, leading to an underpayment of the claim and potential legal challenges. A third incorrect approach would be to arbitrarily assign a percentage of fault to the claimant, without sufficient evidence to support that assessment. This lacks objectivity and can lead to an unfair settlement, either overpaying or underpaying the claim. Professional decision-making in these situations requires a systematic process. First, identify the governing jurisdiction's negligence laws. Second, gather all relevant evidence regarding the incident. Third, objectively assess the actions of all parties to determine fault. Fourth, apply the appropriate legal standard, comparative or contributory negligence, to the assessed fault. And finally, calculate the settlement amount based on this legal analysis. Question 14. The performance metrics show that the average claim handling time for personal property claims has increased by 15% in the last quarter. As a claims manager, you are tasked with identifying strategies to optimize this process. Which of the following strategies best aligns with the regulatory framework for handling personal property claims under the AICM exams jurisdiction, ensuring both efficiency and compliance? Option A. Require policyholders to provide original purchase receipts for every claimed item, and if unavailable, automatically deny coverage for those items to streamline verification. Option B. Conduct a detailed assessment of each claimed personal property item, verifying its condition and value through available documentation and reasonable investigative methods, and settling the claim based on policy terms and applicable regulations. Option C. Implement a standardized depreciation schedule applied uniformly to all personal property items regardless of their actual condition or age, to expedite valuation. Option D. Offer a settlement amount based on a predetermined average replacement cost for similar items in the region, without requiring individual item verification or considering policyholder-provided evidence of value. The correct answer is C. Implement a standardized depreciation schedule applied uniformly to all personal property items regardless of their actual condition or age, to expedite valuation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a claims manager to balance the need for efficient claims processing with the absolute requirement to adhere to regulatory frameworks governing personal property coverage. The pressure to optimize performance metrics, such as reducing average claim handling time, can inadvertently lead to shortcuts that compromise compliance and fair treatment of policyholders. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that process improvements do not violate the principles of accurate valuation, proper documentation, and adherence to policy terms and conditions, all of which are critical under the Associate in Claims Management (AICM) exams regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the policyholder's claim for personal property damage, ensuring that all items are accurately identified, their condition is assessed, and their replacement cost or actual cash value is determined in accordance with the policy provisions and applicable regulations. This includes obtaining necessary documentation, such as receipts or photographs, and applying depreciation correctly if actual cash value is the basis of settlement. This approach is right because it directly aligns with the regulatory mandate to settle claims fairly and promptly, based on the terms of the insurance contract, and without undue delay or denial. It upholds the insurer's obligation to indemnify the policyholder for covered losses, as expected under the AICM exam's jurisdiction. An incorrect approach would be to expedite the settlement by applying a blanket depreciation percentage to all claimed items without individual assessment. This fails to comply with regulations that require an accurate valuation of each item. Another incorrect approach would be to deny coverage for items lacking original purchase receipts, even if other forms of evidence, such as photographs or witness statements, are available to substantiate ownership and value. This demonstrates a lack of reasonable investigation and can be considered a violation of fair claims handling practices. A third incorrect approach would be to offer a settlement based solely on the insurer's internal pricing guides without considering the policyholder's evidence of value, thereby potentially underpaying the claim and contravening the principle of indemnity. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes regulatory compliance and policyholder rights. This involves understanding the specific policy terms, the applicable regulatory requirements for personal property claims, and the evidence presented by the policyholder. When faced with performance pressures, claims managers must advocate for processes that are both efficient and compliant, rather than sacrificing one for the other. This requires a commitment to thorough investigation, accurate valuation, and transparent communication with the policyholder. Question 15. The performance metrics show a significant increase in claims related to operational incidents. In one such claim, the insured's equipment malfunctioned during a delivery, resulting in damage to a third-party property. The insured asserts the malfunction was due to a latent defect in the equipment, while the claimant alleges negligent operation by the insured's driver. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for handling claims involving alleged negligent operation? Option A. Immediately deny the claim based on the claimant's allegation of negligent operation to avoid further investigation costs. Option B. Focus solely on the insured's assertion of a latent defect, disregarding the claimant's allegations of negligent operation without further inquiry. Option C. Settle the claim quickly to maintain good client relations, assuming the malfunction implies negligence regardless of the specific operational details. Option D. Conduct a thorough investigation into the operational circumstances, gathering evidence on the driver's actions, the equipment's maintenance history, and any applicable operational procedures to determine if a breach of the duty of care occurred and if it caused the loss. The correct answer is A. Immediately deny the claim based on the claimant's allegation of negligent operation to avoid further investigation costs. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the claims professional to balance the need for efficient claims resolution with the absolute imperative of adhering to regulatory requirements concerning negligent operation. Misinterpreting or misapplying these regulations can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and a failure to uphold the principles of fair claims handling. The core challenge lies in accurately assessing the degree of negligence and its direct causal link to the loss, while ensuring all procedural and substantive legal requirements are met. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the specific circumstances of the operation leading to the loss, meticulously documenting all evidence related to the operator's actions or inactions. This includes gathering witness statements, reviewing any applicable operational logs or maintenance records, and potentially consulting with subject matter experts if the nature of the operation is complex. The claims professional must then apply the relevant jurisdictional laws and regulations governing negligent operation to the gathered facts. This means determining if the operator's conduct fell below the expected standard of care, and if that deviation directly caused or contributed to the loss. The ultimate decision on liability and the subsequent claims settlement must be demonstrably supported by this factual and legal analysis, ensuring compliance with all statutory and common law duties owed to all parties involved. This approach prioritizes accuracy, fairness, and regulatory adherence, which are fundamental to the associating claims management designation. Incorrect approaches analysis, an approach that focuses solely on the immediate financial impact of the claim, without a comprehensive review of the operational circumstances and the applicable legal standards for negligent operation, is fundamentally flawed. This overlooks the regulatory requirement to establish fault based on established legal principles, potentially leading to an incorrect assessment of liability and an unfair outcome for one or more parties. It also risks violating regulatory guidelines that mandate a thorough and objective investigation. Another incorrect approach would be to assume negligence based on the occurrence of the loss itself, without sufficient evidence to prove a breach of duty of care. This presumption of fault is contrary to the principles of natural justice and the burden of proof required in claims management. Regulatory frameworks typically require demonstrable evidence of negligence, not mere speculation. Finally, an approach that prioritizes expediency over accuracy by settling the claim without a proper investigation into the operational details, and the operator's conduct fails to meet the professional standards expected of an associate in claims management. This can lead to improper payments, setting unfavorable precedents, and a failure to comply with the duty to investigate claims diligently and in good faith. Such an approach neglects the critical element of establishing causation between the alleged negligent operation and the resulting loss. Professional reasoning. Professionals in claims management must adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach. This involves clearly defining the scope of the investigation, identifying all relevant legal and regulatory frameworks, gathering and analyzing factual evidence, and applying legal principles to the facts. When dealing with issues of negligent operation, it is crucial to understand the specific elements that constitute negligence within the relevant jurisdiction, including duty of care, breach of that duty, causation, and damages. A claims professional should always maintain objectivity, document all decisions and their justifications, and seek clarification or expert advice when faced with complex legal or technical issues. The goal is to achieve a fair and legally compliant resolution to the claim. Question 16. Governance review demonstrates that the claims department is under pressure to reduce average claims settlement times. To achieve this, a proposal is being considered to streamline the risk assessment process by reducing the number of data points analyzed for claims below a certain value threshold, relying more on automated flagging for high-risk cases. Which approach best aligns with the claims objectives and regulatory expectations for claims management? Option A. Significantly reduce the number of data points analyzed for all claims, regardless of value, to achieve faster settlement times, with the assumption that most claims are legitimate and minor. Option B. Implement a tiered risk assessment approach that leverages data analytics to identify high-risk claims for detailed review, while allowing for expedited processing of low-risk claims based on predefined objective criteria, ensuring that all claims are subject to appropriate scrutiny. Option C. Focus solely on minimizing the total payout amount for claims by implementing stricter, subjective risk assessment criteria, even if it means longer investigation times for some claims. Option D. Rely primarily on the experience and intuition of senior claims adjusters to assess risk for all claims, bypassing standardized data analysis to expedite the process. The correct answer is B. Implement a tiered risk assessment approach that leverages data analytics to identify high-risk claims for detailed review, while allowing for expedited processing of low-risk claims based on predefined, objective criteria, ensuring that all claims are subject to appropriate scrutiny. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a claims manager to balance competing objectives, ensuring fair claims outcomes, managing operational efficiency, and adhering to regulatory requirements, all while navigating the inherent uncertainties of risk assessment. The pressure to expedite claims processing can sometimes conflict with the thoroughness needed for accurate risk assessment, potentially leading to underpayment or overpayment of claims, both of which have regulatory and ethical implications. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven risk assessment process that integrates with claims objectives. This approach is right because it aligns with the fundamental principles of claims management, which mandate fair and equitable treatment of policyholders while ensuring the financial integrity of the insurer. Specifically, regulatory frameworks for claims management, such as those overseen by the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, in the UK, emphasize treating customers fairly, TCF, and ensuring that claims are handled promptly and honestly. A robust risk assessment framework allows for the identification of potential fraud, the accurate estimation of claim severity, and the appropriate allocation of resources, thereby supporting the objective of paying valid claims accurately and efficiently. This proactive identification and management of risk directly contribute to achieving claims objectives by minimizing financial losses due to fraud or error, and ensuring that policyholders receive their entitled benefits without undue delay or dispute. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thorough risk assessment fails to meet regulatory expectations for fair claims handling. This can lead to claims being settled prematurely without adequate investigation, potentially resulting in underpayments to policyholders, which violates the principle of treating customers fairly and could incur regulatory sanctions. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on minimizing payouts without a commensurate focus on accurate risk assessment also presents significant ethical and regulatory issues. This approach risks denying valid claims or offering settlements that do not reflect the true extent of the loss, thereby breaching the insurer's contractual obligations and undermining customer trust. Regulatory bodies would view such a practice as a failure to act with integrity and in the best interests of the policyholder. A further incorrect approach that relies heavily on anecdotal evidence or subjective judgment rather than objective data for risk assessment is also professionally unsound. This introduces bias and inconsistency into the claims process, making it difficult to ensure fair outcomes and potentially leading to discriminatory practices, which are strictly prohibited by consumer protection regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's claims philosophy, regulatory obligations, and risk appetite. Claims managers should utilize a structured risk assessment methodology that incorporates data analytics, fraud detection tools, and clear guidelines for claim investigation. When faced with competing pressures, the primary consideration must always be the regulatory and ethical imperative to handle claims fairly and accurately. This involves a commitment to thoroughness, transparency, and continuous improvement in risk assessment processes to ensure that claims objectives are met responsibly. Question 17. The assessment process reveals inconsistencies in a claimant's reported injuries following a motor vehicle accident, including a discrepancy between the reported inability to perform daily activities and photographic evidence suggesting otherwise. The claims handler suspects potential fraud. Which of the following investigative tools is most appropriate and compliant with standard claims management regulations for this scenario? Option A. Conducting a thorough review of the claimant's social media profiles for publicly available posts that may corroborate or contradict the reported limitations. Option B. Engaging a private investigator to conduct extensive covert surveillance of the claimant's home and daily activities for an indefinite period. Option C. Immediately denying the claim based on the initial suspicion of fraud due to the photographic discrepancy. Option D. Requesting detailed medical records from all of the claimant's treating physicians, including those unrelated to the accident, without specific justification. Correct answer is B. Engaging a private investigator to conduct extensive covert surveillance of the claimant's home and daily activities for an indefinite period. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a potential insurance fraud scenario, presenting a significant professional challenge for an associate in claims management, AIC. The challenge lies in balancing the need to thoroughly investigate suspected fraud with the imperative to adhere strictly to regulatory frameworks, ethical guidelines, and the claimant's rights. Missteps in this process can lead to regulatory penalties, legal repercussions, reputational damage, and erosion of claimant trust. Careful judgment is required to select investigative tools that are both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves utilizing investigative tools that are legally permissible, ethically sound, and directly relevant to verifying the claim's validity, without infringing on the claimant's privacy beyond what is reasonably necessary for the investigation. This includes employing tools such as reviewing claim documentation for inconsistencies, conducting interviews with the claimant and relevant third parties, and potentially using public record searches to corroborate information provided. These methods are generally accepted within the regulatory framework for claims management, as they are designed to gather objective evidence to support or refute the claim. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of fair investigation, which is a cornerstone of insurance regulation. It ensures that investigations are conducted with due diligence and respect for the claimant's rights, as mandated by regulations governing claims handling and consumer protection. An incorrect approach would be to immediately engage in intrusive surveillance without prior evidence of fraud, or to make unsubstantiated accusations based on initial suspicions. Such actions could violate privacy laws and regulations governing fair claims practices. For instance, initiating covert surveillance without a reasonable basis or a clear investigative plan, beyond what is necessary to verify the claim, could be deemed an overreach and a violation of privacy rights. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on hearsay or unverified information from anonymous sources without independent corroboration. This fails to meet the standard of due diligence required in claims investigations and could lead to an unfair denial of a legitimate claim. Furthermore, failing to document the investigative steps taken and the rationale behind them would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it hinders transparency and accountability. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the available information. First, identify the specific red flags or inconsistencies that trigger suspicion. Second, consult the relevant regulatory framework and internal company policies to determine permissible investigative actions. Third, develop a targeted investigative plan that outlines the specific tools and techniques to be used, ensuring they are proportionate to the level of suspicion and the nature of the claim. Fourth, execute the investigation with meticulous documentation of all activities and findings. Finally, base the claim's decision solely on the objective evidence gathered during the investigation, in accordance with regulatory requirements. Question 18. Compliance review shows that a claims manager is evaluating a disputed claim where the policy wording regarding flood coverage appears to have two plausible interpretations. One interpretation, favored by the policyholder, suggests coverage for water damage originating from a burst internal pipe that subsequently caused extensive water accumulation. The insurer's interpretation, based on a narrower reading of the definition of flood in a specific endorsement, excludes coverage for this type of event, arguing it falls under a separate peril. The claims manager must decide how to proceed with interpreting the policy language. Option A. Prioritize the plain and ordinary meaning of the term flood as defined in the endorsement, considering it in conjunction with the rest of the policy, and only resort to interpreting against the insurer if ambiguity persists after these steps. Option B. Rely solely on the insurer's internal claims manual, which provides guidance on similar water damage scenarios, as this ensures consistency in claim handling. Option C. Seek clarification from the underwriting department to revise the policy wording before making a coverage decision, as the ambiguity creates an unresolvable conflict. Option D. Interpret the ambiguous policy language against the insurer, as the policyholder's interpretation is reasonable and the insurer drafted the endorsement. Correct answer is D. Interpret the ambiguous policy language against the insurer, as the policyholder's interpretation is reasonable and the insurer drafted the endorsement. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a claims manager to interpret and apply the rules of construction to a policy document, which can be ambiguous. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the insurer's intent with the policyholder's reasonable expectations, especially when faced with potentially conflicting clauses. A claims manager must demonstrate a nuanced understanding of legal principles governing contract interpretation to ensure fair and compliant claim handling. The correct approach involves prioritizing the plain meaning of the policy language, considering the policy as a whole, and applying the contra pro frontum rule only as a last resort when ambiguity persists after other interpretive aids have been exhausted. This aligns with the fundamental principle of contract law that the ordinary meaning of words should prevail. Furthermore, regulatory frameworks often mandate that insurance policies be interpreted in a manner that is fair to the policyholder, reflecting a reasonable expectation of coverage. The contra pro frontum rule, which construes ambiguous language against the party that drafted the contract, typically the insurer, serves as a safeguard against unfairness when other methods of interpretation fail to resolve ambiguity. An incorrect approach would be to immediately apply the contra pro frontum rule to any perceived ambiguity, without first attempting to ascertain the plain meaning or considering the policy as a whole. This bypasses established rules of construction and can lead to an unintended expansion of coverage beyond what was reasonably contemplated by the parties at the time of contracting, potentially violating principles of good faith and fair dealing, and leading to regulatory scrutiny. Another incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the insurer's internal underwriting guidelines or claims manual when interpreting the policy, rather than the explicit language of the policy document itself. These internal documents, while important for internal consistency, do not supersede the contractual terms agreed upon by the policyholder. Regulatory bodies expect claims to be settled based on the policy contract, not internal operational procedures. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process. 1. Identify the specific policy provision, S, in question. 2. Determine the plain and ordinary meaning of the language used. 3. Examine the provision in the context of the entire policy document. 4. Consider any relevant definitions within the policy. 5. If ambiguity remains after the above steps, apply the contra pro frontum rule, construing the ambiguity against the insurer. 6. Document the interpretive process and the rationale for the decision. Question 19. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a claimant dissatisfaction due to perceived delays in claim resolution for a complex property damage claim. The claims handler is under pressure to close the file quickly to meet departmental performance metrics, which approach best balances the claimant's needs with the insurer's obligations. Option A. Inform the claimant that the claim is complex and will take an extended period to resolve, without providing specific details or a revised timeline. Option B. Immediately offer a settlement based on an initial assessment to expedite closure and satisfy the claimant's immediate need for funds. Option C. Offer a settlement that is significantly lower than the estimated damages, arguing that it reflects the insurer's risk and the need for prompt resolution. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive investigation, including obtaining all necessary documentation and expert opinions, while keeping the claimant informed of the progress and expected timelines. The correct answer is B. Immediately offer a settlement based on an initial assessment to expedite closure and satisfy the claimant's immediate need for funds. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a claimant with the insurer's obligation to adhere to regulatory requirements and maintain financial solvency. The claims handler must navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure that decisions are fair, transparent, and compliant with the Associated Claims Management (AIC) exam's specified regulatory framework, which for this exam is assumed to be the U.S. regulatory framework. The pressure to settle quickly can sometimes lead to overlooking critical procedural steps or misinterpreting policy terms, which could result in regulatory penalties or damage to the insurer's reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation of the claim, including a review of all relevant documentation and policy provisions, followed by a fair and timely assessment of liability and damages. This approach prioritizes adherence to the policy contract and regulatory mandates, ensuring that the claimant receives what they are entitled to under the law and the policy, while also protecting the insurer from potential bad faith claims or regulatory sanctions. This aligns with the principles of good faith and fair dealing expected of insurers in the U.S. claims environment, as well as specific state insurance regulations that govern claims handling practices, such as prompt payment of claims and fair investigation. An incorrect approach of immediately offering a settlement without a full investigation fails to uphold the insurer's duty to investigate thoroughly. This can lead to underpayment of valid claims or overpayment of invalid ones, both of which can result in regulatory scrutiny and penalties for unfair claims settlement practices. Another incorrect approach of delaying the investigation unnecessarily, even if the claimant is being kept informed, can violate regulations requiring prompt claims handling and may be construed as bad faith. Finally, an approach that prioritizes the insurer's financial interests over the claimant's legitimate rights by offering a settlement significantly below the assessed value of the claim directly contravenes the principles of good faith and fair dealing and can lead to severe regulatory consequences. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the policy terms and applicable regulations. This is followed by a systematic claims investigation process, objective assessment of the claim's merits, and communication with the claimant that is clear, honest, and timely. When faced with pressure, it is crucial to rely on established procedures and seek guidance from supervisors or legal counsel if there is any ambiguity or potential for conflict. Question 20. Quality control measures reveal that an associate claims adjuster has been assigned a claim for a property damage incident involving a close personal friend. The adjuster has known this friend for over 10 years and considers them to be like family. The adjuster believes they can handle the claim objectively and efficiently, ensuring their friend receives a fair settlement. What is the most appropriate course of action for the associate claims adjuster in this situation? Option A. Proceed with handling the claim, confident in their ability to remain impartial and provide a fair settlement to their friend. Option B. Inform their supervisor about the relationship but downplay its significance, stating it will not affect their professional judgment. Option C. Assign the claim to a less experienced colleague in their department without informing their supervisor of the personal connection. Option D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their supervisor and request to be recused from handling the claim. The correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their supervisor and request to be recused from handling the claim. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in claims management where an adjuster's personal relationship with a claimant could compromise objective decision-making and adherence to regulatory standards. Professional challenge lies in maintaining impartiality and ensuring that all claims are handled fairly and consistently, regardless of personal connections. Failure to do so can lead to allegations of bias, regulatory violations, and damage to the insurer's reputation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately disclosing the relationship to the supervisor and recusing oneself from the claim. This upholds the principle of impartiality, a cornerstone of ethical claims handling and regulatory compliance. By stepping aside, the adjuster ensures that the claim is handled by an unbiased party, preventing any appearance or reality of favoritism. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate fair and equitable claims processing and the avoidance of conflicts of interest. It demonstrates a commitment to professional integrity and adherence to internal company policies designed to safeguard against such issues. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with handling the claim, believing personal objectivity can be maintained. This fails to recognize the inherent risk of unconscious bias and the appearance of impropriety. Regulatory bodies and ethical guidelines emphasize the importance of avoiding situations that could reasonably be perceived as a conflict of interest, even if no actual wrongdoing occurs. This approach risks violating regulations concerning fair claims practices and fiduciary duties. Another incorrect approach is to downplay the relationship's significance to the supervisor. This is a failure of transparency and honesty, which are critical ethical and regulatory requirements. Concealing a potential conflict of interest erodes trust and can lead to more severe consequences if discovered, including disciplinary action and regulatory sanctions for misrepresentation. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the claim to a junior colleague without proper oversight or disclosure of the relationship. While it removes the adjuster from direct handling, it does not fully address the potential for indirect influence or the appearance of impropriety if the relationship becomes known to the claimant or others involved. It also fails to ensure the claim is handled with the appropriate level of experience and judgment, and it bypasses the established protocol for managing conflicts of interest. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and transparent approach to potential conflicts of interest. When a personal relationship could influence claim handling, the decision-making process should prioritize disclosure and recusal. This involves 1. Recognizing the potential for conflict. 2. Immediately informing a supervisor or designated compliance officer. 3. Offering to recuse oneself from the claim. 4. Cooperating fully with the process of reassigning the claim. This framework ensures that decisions are made in accordance with regulatory requirements and ethical standards, protecting both the claimant and the insurer.